Hi everyone, and welcome to my video series on traveling mainland Greece. Greece is a country that I have wanted to visit for so long. It has been on my bucket list for many, many years. But I didn't want to visit the country until I knew I had the time to see it in the way that I wanted to see it. I wanted to do the country justice because, in part of my heritage, if you haven't, guessed, my background is Greek. And because there is so much to see and do, I didn't want to fall into the kind of a typical sort of tourist pattern of flying into Athens and then hitting up Santorini and Mykonos, and then maybe doing a little bit of time in Crete as well, and then saying, hey, I've been to Greece, I saw the Acropolis, I saw a couple of beaches, done. There is so much more to Greece, and the mainland isn't often given the attention that I think it deserves. Yes, the islands are beautiful, and yes, the pictures of Santorini and Mykonos and Crete, and of course the blue water and the sand is so inviting, and of course they should be visited as well. But because of my heritage and my connection to Greece, to the religion, to the food, to the cities, to the history, to the people that I've known, to the familial connections that I tenuously sort of have, I really wanted to see the mainland, and I really wanted to see the mainland in one fell sort of swoop, right? I didn't want to just do the capital city and one or two islands. I really wanted to see the full country, and give myself that chance, as someone who comes from an immigrant background, to go back to the motherland, and to really have that experience. It was something that was really important to me. Funny enough, despite my heritage, and despite some of the stereotypes, I don't even want to say stereotypes, I would say it's actually pretty accurate. I never went back to Greece, every summer, the way a lot of Greek people tend to sort of go back to Greece to visit family or spend weeks or months there. I didn't come from a privileged background. We certainly could not afford that. And so even though I went to Greece once when I was 6, I think for a couple of weeks, my understanding is that, and my memories are borderline non-existent, but we really just stayed in Athens for that entire time. I never saw anything outside of the city. And I think I have like 4 memories, which at this point, I don't know if they're real or if they're just made up, right? Like memory can get really tricky as you get older. So in my eyes, this was really the first time, my first, and for all intents and purposes, my only time going to Greece. And what I discovered was something that I didn't even imagine, something that I didn't even know existed. I, like most people, understood Greece to be, Athens and the islands. Despite my heritage and despite going to Greek school for so long, and knowing different members of the Greek community and hearing about, where they came from, I really just knew the standard sort of tourist itinerary, if you will. And the drive that I did, which was literally like the entire coast of the entire mainland, I was floored, and I was just gobsmacked by the endless beauty. I mean, I went through severe dopamine withdrawal when I came back to Canada, because every day, just when I thought I had seen something, the end of what could be beautiful, the country just put something new and grand and exquisite and sublime in front of my eyes. I was endlessly treated to new vistas, just new levels and amounts of beauty that I just did not know existed in that country, and shame on me in particular for not even really knowing that. So this was a very, very, very special trip. For me, it was an opportunity for me to reconnect with my heritage. It was an opportunity for me to go back to the motherland, if you will, and to get reacquainted with this place that has played such an important role in my personal identity, in my social life, but from which I was always detached from. And I think a big part of it has to do with growing up queer. For me, Greek culture was always, this sort of hetero cis framework, that I had to sort of like manage. I associated Greek culture and Greekness with sort of straight cis things, and I actually found it quite, oppressive. And so I felt very alienated from Greek culture, and I rejected a lot of Greek culture, and even Greek people, to be completely honest, as a result of that. Now, granted, Greece and Greek culture and Greek people, just like, the majority of at least the Western world, have evolved and changed, since the 80s and 90s, although Greece isn't, quite, the Netherlands or Canada, or, Germany. It has changed and evolved, as well. But nonetheless, I was just really happy that I was able to go back and re-experience that culture, for myself as an adult. And I felt such a close connection to, the cities, to the history, to the mythology, to the land. And it was a very magical experience. And even though by the end I was exhausted, like, I mean, dead tired, exhausted, I'm so glad that I did this trip and I did it this way. I'm glad that I gave it the time that it deserved, and I'm glad that I pushed through the pretty strenuous and ambitious 5-week itinerary, although a full week was actually dedicated to like Athens and like flying days. I was really on the road for about 4 weeks, but still, with those 4 weeks, I was go, 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 go. Every day I was pretty much going somewhere new. If I wasn't checking out of a hotel and driving somewhere, I was, doing a day trip somewhere. And if I was checking out and going somewhere, I was usually doing a stopover on the road or two on my way to the next city. It was exhausting. It was amazing. And again, I'm really glad that I did it the way that I did, because I got a chance to see so much, all at once, and I didn't really sort of, miss out on anything, and that's something that I'm really, really, really thankful for. Going to Greece was a very emotional journey for me, and deep down, I think I knew it would be, which is possibly why I pushed it off for as long as I did. I've traveled to a decent amount of places, and people would always ask me, like, when are you going to go to Greece? Why aren't you going to Greece? And I always just kind of brush it off at the side. But again, just because of the feelings of alienation that I felt, and that tension that I felt with Greek culture, I think it's something that I, again, pushed off for a time when I was psychologically and emotionally ready to kind of go back and do this trip. And again, wanting to make sure that when I did do it, I gave myself the opportunity to really experience everything there, not just, from an objective place in terms of what, the landscape and what the country offered, but also, internally, that I was prepared to go there and have those experiences too. Also, there were the costs that I had to associate, especially if I wanted to do, this trip in the extended way that I did. And I will get into the costs of this trip a little bit later. Nonetheless, this was the best trip I have ever done, truth be told. And this trip in particular, I challenged myself in a multitude of ways, not just psychologically and emotionally or financially, but also the way that I planned it out or did not plan it out. So usually when I'm, traveling, I research the crap out of somewhere, I book everything in advance, I have my route very clearly planned and laid out, buses, trains, ferries, hotels, all of that is sort of pre-booked, and I know how long I'm staying, where I'm staying, and how I'm going to get to the next sort of like destination. Everything is sort of very clearly lined up. This time around, I booked a one-way ticket, and that was kind of it. Before I left for Greece, I had my hotel in Athens booked, and then I had my first hotel outside of Athens booked, and that was it. So very, very, very different. Very, very different type of trip. I guess, maybe, that sense of emotional instability just like, compelled me to say, hey, why don't you add to that pressure and just, not have anything planned before you go too, and let's see what happens. Luckily, everything turned out okay. But one of the reasons why I think I did this trip this way is I did do a little bit of research in advance just to see what availability of places was going to be like, and I knowing Greece and it being in the off season, I went to Greece at the very end of October and I traveled basically throughout November. There seemed to be a lot of availability for hotels just with a quick scan that I did, and the costs all seemed to be relatively reasonable. So I said, hey, you know what? I don't need to book all these things in advance. It seems like because I'm going during the off season, there's a decent amount of availability, and it doesn't look like things are going to be selling out. So I did do that sort of preliminary research. But when I was there, I would book hotels, one or 2 days or maybe like a couple of days, in advance. So I was literally mapping out my route and choosing the hotels I was going to stay at on the go, and I've never done anything like that. And that's a pretty advanced way of traveling, unless you're someone that, generally speaking, I would say this is a style of traveling if you're younger, where you're like, I'm going to backpack Europe and I'm just going to show up to a hostel. I think once you pass a certain age, like 25, 26, especially 30, your ability to kind of withstand that kind of uncertainty, I think severely diminishes. So I kind of got a taste of that at the bright old age of 40, but I also did it in that sort of like that sort of like 40-year-old sort of like way, where I wasn't staying in a hostel and I wasn't like hitchhiking or running to catch a bus. But before I went to Greece, even though I didn't have my route planned out, and even though I was planning it, along the way, which kind of added to the exhaustion, where, you would come back to, your room at the end of the day, and at 9 o'clock, it's like, okay, I guess I better turn on the computer and go onto Google Maps and start figuring out where I'm going next, because I'm leaving in 2 days and I don't know where I'm staying. I didn't even know that I was going to be driving to do this trip. I thought that I was going to be able to do this trip with trains and buses, and nope. Nope, not in Greece. I have a whole video dedicated to transportation, and actually I'll have another video dedicated to just going over the costing and all the things to consider when you're renting a car. But I literally booked a one-way ticket to Greece and then had to book a car, and then had to, like 2 days before I was leaving, rush to get an international driver's license, and that's not something that I planned for. So again, got completely out of my comfort zone, completely out of my safe zone, in every way, shape, or form. And luckily everything worked out, but I really came back feeling so confident as a traveler and as a person, and I felt this renewed sense of resilience that I haven't felt in a really long time, because I dared to challenge myself and because I pushed myself through some difficult periods, and survived and thrived. Survived's a bit dramatic, so that's like a bit much. I didn't put myself into any sort of peril, but like, I pushed myself and I succeeded, and that was a really, really, really great feeling. One of the best parts of traveling, and one of the best parts of being a solo traveler, is you really do build that sense of resilience, that sense of self-reliance, of doing things on your own, of being intuitive and inventive, of getting yourself out of difficult situations. Like this one point where I was driving down a road, and then the road just like was washed out and stopped, and I had to backtrack, and the sun was going down, and I'm like, how am I going to get back home? More of that later in some of the future sort of like videos, but I really came back feeling so confident in myself and ready to do more sort of like trips like this, and to also actually take bigger chances in my day-to-day life. So this was a very life-changing trip, and I'm really glad that you are choosing to join me on this adventure, on this travelogue. I'm not an influencer. I'm not looking to influence you to sort of necessarily go anywhere. I'm not being paid to make these videos. No one's giving me money to make these videos. The Ministry of Greek Tourism is not lining my pockets with drachmas, but I'm ching, to tell you to go to Greece. But then again, I don't need to tell you to go to Greece. It's Greece. It's one of the most visited countries in the world, and for good reason. But I do hope that if you are on the fence, that the videos that you see, the videos that I show you, that I took while I was there, the pictures that I integrate into the videos that I make, I really do hope that they do sort of like compel you and convince you to go to Greece and to see parts of Greece that don't always get the attention that I think that they that they deserve. And I hope that if you are looking to go to Greece and you're not sure what to do, I do hope that you'll think about going to the mainland and seeing more of the mainland, and that you find my videos helpful and useful in helping you plan your trip.